Welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive. This time we're taking a look at something that might be impacting your favorite foods.
That's right.
A plant disease called Verticillium Wilt.
Uh-huh.
But before we get into that, let me introduce you to the folks at Pharmanaut,
Yeah, so
who is
fungi,
helping us to understand this a little bit better.
they use satellite technology to monitor crops from space.
Really?
Yeah.
Imagine.
So it's like a checkup for your plants.
It is. It's like a health checkup for your plants from orbit.
From space. That's
Yeah.
so cool.
Yeah.
So we've got our eyes in the sky. But what about down in the soil? What exactly is verticillium wilt?
So verticillium wilt is a fungal disease. It's caused by these microscopic fungi that live in the soil,
Okay.
and they can actually lie dormant for years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And they infect a wide range of plants. I mean, we're talking tomatoes, potatoes, peppers,
Wow.
even your morning coffees and stuff.
That's a lot of stuff that we eat every day.
It is a serious threat to
Yeah.
a lot of our favorite foods. So how do these fungi attack a plant?
Well, they invade through the roots, and
Yeah.
then they basically spread throughout the plant's vascular system,
Okay.
which is kind of like the plant's plumbing system.
Okay.
So these fungi essentially clog up the pipes.
So they block everything from moving up.
Yeah. They prevent the water and nutrients from being able to flow.
Oh, so the plants are slowly being choked from the inside out.
Yeah. In a way, yeah, that's a good way to put it.
That's scary. So what are some signs that a plant might be infected?
One of the first things you might notice is wilting,
Okay.
especially during the hottest part of the day. You might also see some yellowing leaves,
Right.
and the edges of those leaves might turn brown and crispy.
That sounds a bit like what happens when a plant just needs more water.
Yeah.
Is it easy to misdiagnose this?
Yeah. You're right. Those symptoms can look like a lot of other problems,
Okay.
which makes it really difficult to catch early on.
Okay.
That's where technology like Pharmanaut comes in.
Right.
Their satellites can detect very subtle changes in the plants,
Wow.
even before we can see them.
So they can see things like temperature and water content.
Exactly. They can see things like temperature, water content, even before any of those visible symptoms appear.
So they can see the stress before we can even see it with our own eyes.
That's right.
That's incredible. How much of a head start does that give farmers?
Well, in the case of tomatoes, for instance, Pharmanaut can detect verticillium wilt 3 to 5 days after infection.
Okay.
Now, if you compare that with traditional visual inspection, that could take 7 to 10 days.
Wow.
So that's a big advantage.
Yeah, it's a huge amount of time.
It is.
So it's like an early warning system
Yeah,
to give farmers time to react.
that's right.
Now, you mentioned that a lot of different plants are vulnerable to this wilt.
Hmm.
Is there a specific type of plant that these fungi just love to attack?
Well, they're actually pretty versatile.
Okay.
They can infect over 19 different types of plants.
Oh, wow.
We're talking tomatoes,
Mhm.
potatoes, strawberries,
Oh,
maple
God.
trees.
It's really.
It's a pretty big range.
So from your backyard garden to massive agricultural fields, this thing could be anywhere.
That's right, pretty much anywhere.
So what can we do to fight back against these soil-dwelling invaders?
You know, there isn't one magic solution.
Oh.
It's more like a multi-pronged defense system.
A system.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's break down this defense system. What's the first line of defense?
Well, one of the most effective strategies is crop rotation.
Okay.
So instead of planting the same susceptible crops in the same spot year after year,
Right.
you switch things up, and that disrupts the fungi's life cycle and makes
Yeah.
it much harder for them to establish.
So we're keeping them guessing.
Exactly. Keep them on their toes.
What else can we do?
Another important tactic is choosing resistant varieties
Okay.
whenever possible. Plant breeders have developed certain types of crops that are less susceptible to verticillium wilt.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it's like giving your plants a little suit of armor.
So we've got crop rotation, we've got resistant varieties.
Right.
What about just getting rid of the fungi themselves? Can we just like nuke them from orbit?
I wish it were that easy. You know, there are chemical treatments available,
No.
but they have limitations.
Right.
And they can have negative impacts on the environment.
Yeah, of course, we don't want to win the battle against the
Yes.
fungi and then lose the war for a healthy environment.
Exactly.
So what are some other options then?
Well, there are some really exciting biological control methods that are gaining popularity.
Okay.
These methods use beneficial organisms to fight the harmful fungi.
Oh, so it's like fighting fire with fire.
It is. It's like a microscopic battle royale happening right there in the soil.
That's so cool. So tell me a little bit more about that. What kind of organisms are we talking about?
Well, for example, there are certain types of fungi and bacteria that can actually help protect plants from verticillium wilt.
Okay.
They might compete with the harmful fungi for resources, or even directly attack them.
So it's like they're the good guys in our soil.
They are. They're the good guys.
Awesome. So we've got beneficial organisms,
Hmm.
we've got crop rotations, we've got resistant varieties.
Mhm.
Are there any other weapons in our arsenal?
There are. Organic gardening practices can help too.
Oh,
Things like adding compost to your soil
right.
can help create a healthier environment that's less hospitable to these fungi.
So it's like we're building up the soil's immune system.
Exactly.
This is all so fascinating.
It
Sounds
is.
like we've got a pretty solid defense strategy going on here.
We do. But the fight against verticillium wilt is ongoing.
Right.
And as we've talked about, early detection is key.
Yeah.
And that's really where Pharmanaut's technology is making a difference. They're not just helping farmers monitor for this specific disease.
Right.
They're also providing really valuable data that can improve overall crop management.
It's like having this team of experts
It is.
constantly monitoring the fields from space.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
But Pharmanaut isn't stopping there, are they? What other exciting things are they working on?
Oh, they're definitely pushing the boundaries of agricultural technology.
Okay.
They're exploring cutting-edge solutions like gene editing
Okay.
to develop crops that are even more resistant to diseases.
Gene editing. That sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi movie.
It does, doesn't it? But it's becoming a reality in agriculture.
Wow.
Imagine crops that are specifically engineered to withstand the challenges of a changing climate
Right.
and the increasing threat of plant diseases.
That's amazing. So it sounds like we've covered a lot of ground here. We've learned about this sneaky disease, the damage it can cause, and the various strategies that are being used to fight back, from good old-fashioned crop rotation to high-tech gene editing.
We have.
But there's one big question that's looming in my mind.
Okay, what's that?
Climate change. It's affecting everything these days, and I can't help but wonder how it might impact the spread and severity of plant diseases like Verticillium wilt. Is this something that Pharmanaut and other researchers are looking into?
Absolutely. Climate change is a major concern for the future of agriculture. And that's exactly what we'll be diving into in our next segment.
Stay tuned, listeners, because this deep dive is about to get even more interesting.
Welcome back to our deep dive on Verticillium wilt. Before the break, we were talking about how climate change might affect plant diseases.
Yeah, it's kind of scary when you think about it. So how might a changing climate actually make this problem even worse?
Well, one way is through rising temperatures. Warmer temperatures can create ideal conditions for some pathogens to grow and spread.
Okay, so warmer weather equals more Verticillium wilt. And could it spread to new areas?
That's right. Some studies suggest that as temperatures rise, we could see the geographic range of certain plant diseases expanding, affecting regions that maybe haven't had to deal with them before.
That's a scary thought. So warmer weather might mean more Verticillium wilt.
Well.
What else should we be concerned about?
Well, another big factor is changes in precipitation patterns. We're seeing more extreme weather events like droughts and floods, which can put a lot of stress on plants and make them more susceptible to diseases.
Yeah, I've definitely noticed that those extreme weather swings are becoming more and more common. But how do these extreme conditions actually weaken the plants?
Well, droughts, for example, can starve plants of the water they need to survive, making them weaker and easier targets for things like pathogens.
Okay.
On the other hand, floods can create waterlogged soil conditions
Right.
that can really favor the growth and spread of certain fungi and bacteria.
So it's like a lose-lose situation.
It is. It's kind of like climate change is creating this perfect storm for plant diseases.
Yeah, it's almost like we're fighting a war on multiple fronts.
That's a great way to put it. And it's not just the direct effects of temperature and precipitation that we have to worry about. Climate change can also indirectly impact plant diseases by altering the balance of ecosystems.
Can you explain that a little bit? I'm not sure I totally understand.
Sure. Well, remember those beneficial organisms we talked about earlier?
Right.
Like the trichoderma fungi?
Yeah, the good guys.
Yeah, they're like the guardians of the soil.
Right.
They help to keep harmful pathogens in check.
Right.
But climate change can disrupt these balances. If the conditions change, the populations of these beneficial organisms could decline.
And that leaves plants more vulnerable.
Exactly. It's like losing some of your best soldiers in a war.
Right. So climate change could actually weaken our natural defenses.
It's a real concern.
Yeah.
But, there is hope. Researchers are working hard to understand these complex interactions and develop strategies to try and lessen the impacts of climate change on plant health.
That's good to hear. Speaking of research, we've talked a lot about Pharmanaut and their technology. Are they doing anything specific to address the challenges of climate change?
Absolutely. Pharmanaut is really committed to using data to drive solutions. They're collecting huge amounts of data on crop health, soil conditions,
Yeah.
weather patterns, you name it.
It's like they're building this giant library of information about the planet's health.
They are. And they're using that information to develop predictive models that can help anticipate how climate change might impact plant diseases in different regions.
So they're trying to predict the future?
In a way, yes.
That's amazing.
And they're also working on developing more resilient crops.
Okay.
Varieties that can better withstand the stress of a changing climate.
So it's like a two-pronged approach. They're trying to anticipate the impacts
Right.
and then come up with solutions to deal with them.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that they're not working alone. There are lots of researchers and innovators around the world who are collaborating to try and address this global challenge.
That's good to hear.
Hmm.
But I'm curious, beyond all the data and technology, what can everyday people like me do to help? Are there things that we can do in our own gardens to make our plants more resilient?
That's a great question. And it's something we'll explore in our final segment. We'll discuss some practical steps that you can take to protect your plants, whether you're a seasoned gardener or just starting out.
Stay tuned, listeners, because we're about to empower you with the knowledge to fight back against Verticillium wilt and other plant diseases. Welcome back to our deep dive into the world of Verticillium wilt. Before we left off, we were talking about how climate change is really impacting plant diseases and what researchers are doing to try and, stay ahead of it.
Yeah, and it's important to remember that we all have a role to play
Right.
in protecting our plants from, large-scale farms all the way down to our backyard gardens.
So let's talk about what we can do as individuals. What are some practical things that we can do to make our plants more resilient to things like Verticillium wilt?
Well, one of the simplest but most effective things you can do is just choose the right plants for your garden.
Okay. So how do we know which plants to choose?
Well, if you know that Verticillium wilt has been a problem in your garden, or even in your area, you can look for varieties that are labeled as resistant to the disease.
So check the label before you buy.
Exactly. It's like checking the nutrition label on your food, but for plants.
I like that. What else can we do to give our plants a fighting chance?
Creating a healthy soil environment is key.
Yeah.
Remember we talked about compost earlier?
Yeah.
Adding compost to your garden beds can really make a huge difference.
I actually tried that last year. I added compost to my tomato plants.
Oh, yeah.
And wow, what a difference it made. They were so much healthier.
That's great to hear. Yeah, compost is like a superfood for your soil.
Okay.
It introduces all those beneficial microorganisms that we talked about. It improves the structure of the soil, and it even helps to suppress disease-causing organisms.
So it's like we're building a strong foundation for our plants.
Exactly.
What other organic practices can we use?
Well, mulching is another great technique.
Yeah.
Applying a layer of mulch around your plants helps to retain moisture in the soil. It suppresses weeds and it moderates the soil temperature, all of which can contribute to healthier plants.
So compost, mulch, anything else?
Absolutely. Watering your plants properly is really important. You want to water deeply, but less frequently.
Okay.
This will encourage the roots to grow deep down into the soil, where they're less likely to encounter those verticillium fungi.
So deeper roots, healthier plants.
Exactly. And speaking of, helping your plants along, you can also prune them to improve air circulation.
Okay.
This helps to reduce the humidity levels around the plants, making it less inviting for fungal diseases.
Okay, so we're talking about choosing the right plants, building healthy soil, watering correctly, and pruning for good air circulation.
You got it.
That's a lot of great tips. It seems like we really do have a lot of control over the health of our plants.
We do. And remember, even if you do everything right, you might still run into some problems.
Right.
Don't get discouraged. Gardening is a learning experience.
It is.
And as we've talked about throughout this whole deep dive, there's a lot of research and innovation happening in agriculture with companies like Pharmanaut really leading the charge.
It's been really amazing to explore this microscopic world beneath our feet. The good fungi versus the bad fungi, and all the cool ways that technology is helping us understand and manage these plant diseases.
It has. And remember, knowledge is power. The more we understand about these challenges, the better we can protect our plants and our planet.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Listeners, we hope you've enjoyed this deep dive into Verticillium wilt. We encourage you to go out there, try some of these tips in your own garden, and stay curious about the world of plants and all the science that's happening behind the scenes.
Thanks for joining us, and until next time, happy gardening.